much about the technology you're using, or who did what, or what algorithm you use, or what's your foundational model. Are you using an API, or are you building it in-house? Where's your data set coming from? They might pay someone to do technical due diligence later on. They want to know, hey, can I make money to pay back my investors so that they're happy with me and so I can invest in the next startup, right? So anyways, again, common sense stuff. You're all smart people. I'm sure you know this, but make sure you think about, how are you creating value for the other person? So let's talk through some do's and don'ts of pitching new ideas. So to be honest, this is the first time I've done this, this particular workshop. Normally I'm way more focused on the investment pitch, investment fundraising, so you can all give me feedback if you find this valuable or not. But let's go through a few do's and don'ts. Okay, first of all, don't make the story all about you. An example I'll give is sometimes I see sort of climate tech or impact startups, and they come and they pitch in a room full of people, and they tell a very emotional story about why they're in this. I don't know, their village is going to be flooded with water from ocean levels rising, something like this. A very emotional, very connecting story, but they don't really relate that to what is the product they're even building and who the user or customer would be. By the way, user, customer, two different things. So what I always encourage them to do is to, yes, tell a story and show that you connect with it, but still make it about the user or customer. Why do they care about it? So your solution has a climate impact, but for who exactly that's using that solution. But do show passion in your why. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't mention that your grandparents' village is at risk of rising seawaters or something, right? You have that why, you have that passion. I don't know if any of you follow Y Combinator on like Instagram or LinkedIn, but like some of the best founders, they're not the smartest, they're not the most experienced at sales, at coding, at programming, at whatever it is. They're the ones that are most passionate, that can stick through it when they're growing their venture or working on that idea, right? Don't focus on the product. Okay, this one's always fun to say to a bunch of like engineers and computer scientists and programmers. So I know you will all take me out and tar and feather me later, but no one gives a shit about the product, actually. Why? Because we care about the problem, right? If I go to a customer, and I know I'm being a little bit facetious here, a little bit overkill, right? Typical American, I know. But if you go to a customer and you say, like I had a customer, they help shipping companies sort of digitalize their papers. And you go to them and say, well, our LLM is using this technology, and we've got this factor, and this feature here and here and here. Customer, so what? I just care that I have this stack full of papers here that my employees have to go through, and now I'm not getting additional revenue in, and I have extra costs, blah, 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 blah. So at the end of the day, the user doesn't really care about the tech. They care about, does it solve a problem for me? So it doesn't mean the tech doesn't matter, right? But it means that you really need to, when you pitch something, focus in on what is the problem and the pain you're solving for that user or person, and not go over into details. Now I know you have a very specific sort of guidelines in what you're supposed to present. It's a little more research focused, so I'm a little bit being the rebel here. But still, think about that when you're developing your pitch. Okay, don't use technical jargon or talk too much about the technology. Again, I know all the engineers, I can feel your beams of hate at me. But seriously, especially depending on the audience. If it's a very technical audience, then of course you can use some things, right? Of course. But if it's a mixed audience, stay away from that. You can get into that later because you don't want people's eyes to glaze over. You do want to hint at why this particular technology is perfect for this problem, right? So it's not that we say, oh, we don't care about technology, but it's rather like why this particular technology in the context of the problem. So again, it's all about the problem, not the solution or the features. Okay. Don't try to pitch every little consideration or detail. And this I see happen the most with very, very smart people, because you thought about everything. Well, we do that, and we do that, we thought about this and this, and what if the customer says this, or the user does that? So then we built this thing in here. It's okay. relax. Don't talk about all of that. Just highlight the essentials. Again, related back to the problem you're solving. And do show that you're smart and you pay attention. So you can convince a person, whether it's an investor, a potential co-founder, a judge, whoever, that you're competent and you did think about these details without saying every single detail. And how do you do that? By highlighting the right things, the right questions, the right technical word when it's needed in the right context. Don't put people to sleep or make them bored. So I see a lot of faces that look bored and sleepy right now, so I might not be following my own advice. Yeah, keep it interesting, right? Like throw in something that they weren't expecting that wakes the audience up. There's once a silicone, I guess some of you are from Netherlands, but maybe you all know the term Mittelstand, right? Or like these German family-owned businesses. So there's once like this investment meeting of all these very old, white, traditional German Mittelstand owners. And there was a bunch of startup pitches. And there's a 3D additive manufacturing startup pitching. And they could use, they were printing silicon materials with additive manufacturing, so very difficult to do depending on the material, right? And in their slide deck, everyone sort of boring. All of a sudden you see a bunch of examples of different human anatomy that they were able to print with their 3D printer. You're like, whoa, what is like all of a sudden on the screen in front of me right now? You guys can use your imagination what was there. And of course the whole room sort of like giggled a little bit, like these old guys giggled, and then everyone was talking about it and texting about it. So I'm not saying put, graphically explicit images on your slides, but I am saying do things that wake people up, that make them remember your pitch. I don't remember any of the other pitches that happened in that conference, but I do remember this one company now, right? So, don't put people to sleep. Stand out from the crowd, be memorable. That goes to the last point as well. Why am I going to memorize? Like, here it's not too bad. You've got 10 pitches, I think, right? So you only have 9 other teams that you need to sort of stand out from. The average investor sees around 1,000 pitch decks a year, which means as a startup, if you're pitching your deck to them, you really have to look different, right? Okay, don't forget to take a breath. You notice how everyone's like, wait, what's going on? Paid attention, now you're refocused on me. It's a classic trick when you're pitching. Take a breath, breathe. Especially at the points where you want people to pay attention. Remember to smile and be friendly. I try to smile, I try to be friendly. I know I'm up here very non-academically, using a few swear words, bringing in sort of the startup, the feeling to things. That's sort of my job in life. But yeah, hopefully you all feel that you can approach me later on and aren't too scared, I hope. I know I'm an American, but please, I'm an American in Germany, so we'll talk about jokes on Americans later. Okay, don't be afraid to pitch a big vision, yeah? And when I say big vision, I don't mean just saying, oh, we're going to be the #1 provider of blah, 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 blah. That's just sort of like, oh, we want to be the best. That's not really a vision. No. What's a good vision? We envision a solution where all researchers have spent as little time as necessary getting literature reviews and as much time as they want doing actual research or something like this, right? Or we envision a world where all research is equitable and considers diversity, equity, and inclusion factors. Something that investors can get behind, that customers can get behind, that mentors, that potential co-founders, that potential employees, that potential partners, that everyone can sort of get behind. That's a good vision. And I know, especially in German culture and some European cultures, well, I shouldn't pitch anything I can't actually build, right? I should be very practical and reasonable. Yeah, but people get behind big vision, right? People like to be inspired. They like to follow something that's bigger than any one person, I always joke that the best founders would be a mix of this, a little bit of this American style of like, well, we'll just figure out how to build it. Let's pitch a big vision and get there, and yeah, it'll happen. And then there's the German founders over here, and they're like, well, 2 years of planning, 2 years of research, 2 years of data validation. Okay, we think we can get 1% of the German market. Okay, exaggeration, but it takes both, right? You have to be smart, you have to plan, you have to do your research, you have to know your customer, you have to see if the technology works, you have to make sure the technology is safe, all of this stuff. But then don't forget that people are humans. We like vision, and we like big ideas, and we like supporting things. So don't be afraid to pitch that. And give the audience a real CTA. Everyone know what a CTA is? It's a marketing term, very important. Call to action. Yes. What is the call to action? So very often I see pitches, any pitch actually, and they do a great pitch, and then they're just like, yeah, so yeah, maybe contact us if you're interested. And they walk off. No. Give it. What's your specific need? Do you want to take this project further? Our call to action is we'd like to find anyone who turn this idea into a real startup. Or, hey, we'd like to talk to a couple investors and see if this thing is even fundable. It's going to take a lot of money to develop this model and get all that data. Or, hey, we would like to speak with someone who can help us write a grant proposal to work on this idea more. Be very specific so that someone in the room, they probably won't be able to directly help you, but if you're specific enough, they might know someone who can help you and can make the connection. So have a real CTA. Okay, American analogies. A good pitch shouldn't leave the audience bloated and overwhelmed. That's why I said leave out the technical jargon, don't talk about everything, don't focus too much on the details. Tell a story that makes the other person, whoever's listening, get value from it. So the example I like to give, I already talked about turkeys in probably too much detail. There's the American Thanksgiving dinner, right? You eat it and then you're just like bloated, and you know, there's a reason why Americans tend to be a little on the heavy side. And then there's the nice French appetizers, you know, super small, delicate, very healthy, makes you hungry for a little more, right? A good pitch is not like this. A good pitch is like this. Your goal in a pitch is not to make every question answered. It's actually to make people have more questions. So if you see a pitch and you see the investors after the founder's done and there's like, they don't ask any more questions, that means it was a terrible pitch or a terrible idea. One of the two, probably both. If you see a pitch and the investors or whoever start grilling the founder, well, what about this? Have you thought about this? Did you do this? It's actually a really good sign, right? And that's what you want. You want people to come up to you at the end and say, I loved what you did in this hackathon. Can we talk about it? Maybe we can build a PhD position around this or whatever it is, right? Okay, so you'll get the slides. You can also take a screenshot if you want. This is a very classic elevator pitch. So anyone from idea stage up to Series A, Series B startups can use this kind of template. It's a little bit generic. You can use it towards a customer. You can use it towards an investor, anyone else. There's other templates out there. You can just use this if you want. I check what the guidelines are for your pitch tomorrow, right? I don't want to lead you astray. But a couple things to point out. First of all, who are you? Who's talking to me? Yeah, that's interesting. And then secondly, look at this. I don't talk about what I'm building or doing or the features I have. I talk about the pain that I'm mitigating or relieving, the problem that I'm trying to fix, and who I'm trying to fix that problem for, and why that creates value for them. There's 3 ways to create value normally in the business world. So I apologize that a lot of my context is more on the for-profit side, less on the non-profit side. But still, there's time, right? You can save time. Time is often money, so you can either help someone either make more money or save more money. And then there's quality, right? You can increase the quality of an experience, of an emotion, of a product, of a result, less regulatory risk, for example. Often, especially, no offense, with engineers, I see quality being the main focus. Oh, we can make this 1% better, 2% better. That's good, but that's also the hardest value proposition to sell to a potential customer. It's way easier to sell, hey, I save you time, you can make more cakes. Or hey, I save you money, you can do more research with your current grants, whatever it is, right? So consider those factors. Okay. Practice, practice, practice. So before you pitch tomorrow morning, wake up, drink some coffee, stand in front of the mirror, and do it 20 times. The first couple of times, you're going to feel pretty confident. And then practice round 3 through 15, you're going to feel terrible. Like, ah, man, it sucks. It feels so like robotic. And then 17, 18, 19, 20, it'll start to be natural. You'll feel comfortable, and then you can deliver the pitch. So you just have to practice. It's I didn't get this way with my personality stuff just from doing it once. So that's all I have for you. I'm happy to answer questions or share more examples from startup founders. I'm around through the afternoon. That's my LinkedIn. Can share with you the worst pitches I've ever heard, the best pitches I've ever heard, and everything in between. But yeah, thanks, and yeah, good luck also. Any questions or comments or? Okay, give me. Put your hands here. Put your hands here. Okay. Now either go this way or this way. I leave it up to you. User experience. Okay, but for value, getting value out of this. Okay. If you have feedback, please give it to me. Yeah.
Not necessarily feedback, but rather a question. You hinted at that user and customer might be very different things.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate on what you meant with that in the context of what we are doing here and how we should use it in terms of the pitch?
Exactly. So your user might be a poor PhD student stuck analyzing a bunch of data. Your customer might be the professor in charge of the budget for that research student that's not using it.
So should you focus on the user at all if he's not paying for it anyway? Like you need to convince the professor, right?
Well, what happens if you convince the professor and then the PhD student doesn't want to use the software?
Throw the money.
So it's a fair question, but it's very, very important. And startups often mix this up. But if the user and the customer are different, and this is, by the way, most B2B cases, then you really have to figure out, one, how do you convince the person who's writing the check, who's handing over the cash, but then also how do you make a product that users are going to enjoy and keep using and give good feedback to that person for. So both are important. Typically, I see with early stage idea teams, let's say, they focus on the user, which is, it's a logical starting point, but you have to also consider the customer if you want to make a business out of it. If you want to make a nonprofit, then it's different, maybe. Yes?
You talked about like the difference between the German and the American culture of pitching and also investing as well.
Some stereotypes, but yes, sure.
So my point is, if you're in Germany, for example, what's your experience? Is it better to toe the line, play the game as the culture plays it, or actually go against it and bring in something new? So how would you pitch it to, for example, a German venture capitalist? How would you pitch your startup? The German way or the American way?
There's not very many German venture capitalists, and most of them have more of a U.S. growth mindset, I guess you could say, if that is such a thing. So I would say it's more like if you're pitching to a family office versus a VC. So I think the VCs are going to want more of the American style pitch. More like the potential. There's two types of startups. There's more than two types, but there's two types of main startups. There's scalable startups and there's saleable startups. I'll just flip someone off there. Better not do my fingers anymore. Okay. A scalable startup is something that can really grow, enter multiple markets, get multiple rounds of venture capital, with every round of investment increasing the valuation so that there is still an exit scenario in 7 to 15 years, depending if you're SaaS or biotech. Okay? Saleable startups are startups that are built with a very specific purpose to be acquired by another firm down the road. So if I buy a UX startup, let's say, maybe it's a very niche market, only 1,000 customers in a very specific region, I might build it for Yi's company to acquire at some point. So you first need to think about that, but then in terms of how you pitch or who you pitch, I think you should adjust a little bit to different audiences. But then I would say, ask yourself the question, what kind of company do I actually want to build? Because a family office is probably going to want you to make a very sort of, not even necessarily a startup, but a sustainable business, a sustainable in terms of revenue business, right? And if that's what you want to build, awesome. I did research on new investment models for sort of sustainable revenue companies. If your goal or what you want to do is to have an exit scenario, then you probably need to think in terms of saleable or scalable, and you need to design and pitch accordingly and find the right people. And there's a great book, it's called, it's by Steve Blank, it's the Startup User's Owner Manual. And it's actually all about customer development and customer validation. And there you can sort of get the sense of, is this something that has a big market that we can really scale, or is this something that has a niche market we sell to someone?